I'd like to welcome Mark Seal to the show. Mark, welcome to First Things First.
Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you. I'm looking forward to this episode, and thank you for having me on your show today, Rob.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Mark. You've really just been a delight to get to know, and I can't wait for the audience to hear some of your stories. But let me start with, you kind of had an amazing career. When I looked at it, I checked again on LinkedIn what all you've done. And so you've kind of been a consultant. You worked for big industry, small industry. Maybe you could take the listeners through your background and then maybe talk a little bit about your current role at Emser Tile.
Absolutely. I've been in supply chain and global sourcing for well over 30 years plus. And I've had I got to be a part of the Home Depot during the growth years. And really, as they were evolving as a real brand in the marketplace, I've led my own. I had an environmental logistics company for a period of time, and now I'm with Emser Tile as VP of Supply Chain. In my role, supply chain is a little misleading in my role, as I own from everything from product development all the way to delivery to customer and all the pieces in between. So international distribution. I have a responsibility also for installation materials.
Yeah, that's a pretty diverse role for sure. So thanks for sharing that. So maybe next, if you could, Mark, you and I talked a little bit several months ago about what a crazy ride it's been. Maybe take us back to about May of 2020, if you can remember that, and sort of what a crazy ride it's been and what has been the impact on Emser Tile of all the stuff that we all talk about, the unpredictability of supply and the increase in demand and so forth. Can you give us a little color around what that's been like?
Yeah, absolutely. I still have some of the scars from May 2020. What's interesting about from our side of the business is we are in the construction industry. We manufacture tile, and we, for homes, commercial projects, residential, and so forth. And our industry never stopped. They kept on going. They worked around COVID. So, we ran into a lot of challenges from countries closing, where they were shutting down factories, no containers, lack of ocean cargo space, and so forth. So we actually went a whole 70 days or so without any product flowing to us whatsoever. And we're fairly diversified. We're in 20 plus countries around the world, coming out of about 30 different ports into about 4 or 5 ports into the U.S. So it was a fairly dramatic impact. One of the blessings, though, and our industry is very inventory intensive, we were in a pretty good position once COVID started from an inventory standpoint, but it drained our inventory dramatically, and we really kind of forced us to really kind of flip supply chain on its head.
Yeah, that's one of the more interesting parts of that story, Mark, as we progressed, and I'd love for you to share with the audience is, how did you adjust to that, right? When you talk about literally the world shutting down, running through all your inventory, 70 days to get more inventory, how did you make adjustments to get that sort of back in some kind of synchronization? Obviously, you survived it and thrived in it. How'd you make those adjustments?
Well, absolutely. So first of all, our company has a philosophy, 2 real guiding principles that are always a unique challenge for us in supply chain. Number 1 is, how do you say yes to your customer? You're not allowed to come home with a no to our customers. And number 2, how do you have your cake and eat it too? So we always talk about this as a company because, as everyone on this podcast knows, supply chain is about, capacities, mathematics, there's a certain number of days, transit, so forth. And so when you're out there promising, and we've got well over 1,000 sales associates on the ground every day, out there telling people yes. And then, we've got this dynamic of supply chain, and we're trying to figure out that how do we be profitable but deliver to the customer need. So one of the things that, and retooling has always been a part of our game, is we really had to take a look back and say, what are we going to do? Because it was impossible to build inventory. Okay. And so we put in a number of things, firsthand. Number one, we call first port. And first port means, and I'll give you an example of what first port is that if we're manufacturing product in Turkey, and let's say we produced 100 containers, and those 100 containers were for a number of ports in the US, we'll likely take 50% of those containers and land them to the closest US port that has one of our DCs in. So for example, Turkey to Norfolk, we can get there in about 28 days. So we'll take 50 of that 100 containers and send it directly to Norfolk, where that way, at least if we can ground it, we can move the product anywhere we need to in the US. And in some cases, especially when you're coming from Turkey to go to Los Angeles, you're picking up 4 weeks. Well, 4 weeks when you have in the construction industry, we're the last 100 feet to them closing on the house or turning over the commercial building to the owner. So the pressure on the tile business is extreme to hit those timelines and ETAs. So this first port has really paid off in a lot of different ways. Certainly has a cost to it, but when you're pushing to this kind of pressure, the goal is get product to the customer as fast as you can and have an agile supply chain. So that's the first thing we did. The second thing we did was we worked with factories on key products. So in running tile, you run it for a number of days. And so if, let's say we're going to run a product that we only really need about 4 days worth of material currently, we might tell the factory, go ahead and run that for 8 days. And by running it for 8 days, they'll go ahead and ship us the 4 days we need. And the balance of the days, they'll stock at their warehouse and wait for us to then turn around and ship it when we can get available containers. So what we really, and being an inventory intensive, industry, we had to really start to take a different look by doing some of these things. And we really changed our whole game to about flow. Okay. And I think that that's really what has been a game changer for us. And what I mean by flow, it's not really just in time. It's really more about if every 2 weeks we can get a particular SKU landing somewhere, okay, we can at least maneuver it to take care of customers. And quite frankly, we've had to make a lot of adjustments, okay, based on what customer needs what and move stuff around domestically. But at least we've been able to fulfill our customers' need by doing this. We don't think that building inventory is going to be the game that gets played for a while. We've seen transit times go from 92 days on average to well over 160 from the time you place the order with the factory to the time you're delivering it to a distribution center in the US. So when you have that kind of transit time growth and basically 18 months, and you have no guarantee you're going to get on a ship or that there's going to be container availability, you really start to say, okay, we got to quit looking at this traditionally, okay? And we've got to start saying about, let's just keep stuff flowing. If we can get flow, and if we can minimize that we don't have a gap larger than about 2 weeks between product flow, we can hit most of the ETAs with our customers that they need, and they really don't see any challenges from us. I equate this, my analogy is to like a duck on water. The duck is flowing along very smoothly on top, very calm, but meanwhile, the feet are moving so fast to keep up.
Mark, I have so many questions to ask you, lots of unpack there, and I'm not sure exactly which way I want to take this. Before I ask you a question, though, I just want to highlight that Joaquin is tuning in all the way from Mozambique, Mark. So when you talk about a far-flung supply chain, we've got a listener from Mozambique on the line. Shout out to Joaquin. So Mark, a couple ways that I can take this, and maybe up to you how you want to take it. One is I recall that it also required you to develop sort of a new skill because you had to put your sales hat on.
Yeah.
You had to go meet those customers firsthand. So, that's one area I'd like you to maybe take it in for us. Or the other thing is, when you transitioned from, your traditional methodologies to going to first port, having the factories stock the product, moving to a flow model, what impact did that have on your organization? Who had to change? How did they have to change? So either way, take that, sales hat or operational challenges.
Yeah, we'll take them both. Number one, I've always had to wear somewhat of a sales hat at Emser. So I think that having product development, up under my responsibility, I've had to pay close attention to what the customers need and so forth from a look and standpoint. We also have a director of design and trend who reports to me, and she's constantly teaching me about where things are going. And I've really had to stay kind of in touch with that. But here's the thing. We're all selling, right? And what we really have to go and sell people on, and what I had to go out and meet customers personally on, is what Emser was going to do, for them, okay, all the way through its process to take care of its customers. Because remember, we're always trying to say yes to the customer, okay? And the second thing is we're trying to have our cake and eat it too. So the reality is that by going out and meeting with customers, and I urge every supply chain leader, you should be out talking to customers, because in many cases, your customers can help you with insights. And that's how we came up with some things like first port and so forth, is getting insights from customers on their needs, what they were willing to do, how flexible they could be, how inflexible they might be, particular customers. And that really allowed us to help shape some of that and get direct feedback firsthand from customers. Kind of the second piece, to this whole thing is that, what we really had to figure out is, as a company, how we're gonna play at a high level of the game, right? Because the whole reason that Emser we have 78 locations across the U.S., is to have local support to our customers. And so those branches are that local support. And so our supply chain has to link into how do we provide that local support. And those 78, branches, all of them get to run their business. They run their business and they tell us what they need. So I basically have 78 presidents, okay, out there running around, making decisions, saying yes to customers.
Man, that's incredible. So internally, Mark, with your organization, how did you guys have to change to adjust that? I mean, your folks, I'm sure, were used to doing things a certain way for a long time, and all of a sudden you had to kind of turn your whole organization on a dime, yeah?
Well, our whole philosophy has been about having inventory, right? And so the first thing we had to teach everybody is the game is no longer about inventory. And quite frankly, I think that with potential recession coming and so forth, I think all supply chain leaders need to quit thinking about and get their companies to change the measurements of fill rate and inventory levels, and really start getting engaged in how you can figure out how to flow. Because the pressure on supply chain leaders, especially if indeed we go into a recession, obviously to some of the things you pointed out early on in your conversation, inventory tightness, demand that goes, diminishing demand, how to manage your inventory. It's really going to be about how you're going to flow. And you really, and so we had to teach everybody in our company about, quit worrying about, are we in stock? Start worrying about what's the next arrival day. Okay. Right. And let's measure orders to the next arrival day. And we're about to launch a project where we're going to start to adjust our open order software to where you can see the supply chain across the water. So now you can hook orders, okay, and allocate orders to what's coming in, because the goal is we're probably never going to go, but at least in the foreseeable future, the game is not going to be about being in stock, and growing inventory. It's going to be about maximizing the flow of your inventory and fulfilling orders from that flow.
So, Mark, you preempted my question. I was going to ask you for some predictions for the future. So you gave us some good predictions in terms of how your supply chain is going to change. Do you have any insight or thoughts in terms of whether or not we're going to stop having such a constant dynamic around supply, right? We've been short of everything from factory space to raw materials to truck space to vessel space. How do you see the whole supply side of the equation? Not I don't mean your products, I just mean in general, the suppliers of all your services and products. Do you think that will become stable again? Because that's the second part.
I think that for the next 24 months, we're in the norm, okay? Because what we're seeing is, rotating, raw material issues from industry to industry. It's bouncing around all over the place. Most recently in the news, there's been a lot of talk about, potential food shortages because of ingredients and so forth. So if you really, what's really hard to predict is your industry going to start to have raw material challenges? And I urge all to get really connected to the manufacturers you're working with that are producing your products to really understand, where they're at with raw material, because we really need to all start taking a look further up the supply chain to what is the raw materials going into your products and where do they source those? And what we've really found out in my industry, especially on the installation material side, is there was like one supplier making all the resin, additive for every company who makes mastics around the world. One supplier. And everybody had a real wake-up call when there now was allocation with that one raw material supplier. So I really urge you to know where your raw materials are to make sure that your industry has some bit of soundproofing to keep you from all of a sudden waking up one morning and saying, wow, petroleum product really was in my product, and now I can't get what I need, and I'm not going to get it for 4 months. And I think that if you're going to wind up in a situation like that, and we're working with that with all our factory base, with all the various products we do, what are all the raw materials? And are there other options for raw materials? Start working on that now, because it's just going to get more complex.
Mark, that's great advice. Last one of my podcasts, I talked about Shimano, who supplies most of the gears for bicycles. Right. And they're single supplier, right? So almost every bike manufacturer couldn't get their product. So I think that's great advice. How about on the flip side, sort of closer to home? Anything we can do or that you recommend that we can do about sort of container shortages and price hikes, or is that here to stay as well?
I actually think that pricing is going to settle down in the next 18 months or so. And the reason I think that is I think there's a lot of ships coming on. There's going to be a lot of new ship cargo space. And I think with some slowing down of some consumer products, we're going to see some availability come up. I don't think we're ever going back to the days of what we saw pre-COVID in pricing of containers, but I do think they'll be flattening out and some of these exorbitant spot rates will come down.
Well, that's a good note to end on, Mark, because that should give everybody hope. And I want to tell everybody, too, I actually saw Mark and one of the owners of the company at the Trans-Pacific Maritime Conference this year, which was interesting to make sure that they got a real good beat on it. So just another good management practice is the leadership of that company went to meet with the carriers firsthand to get some really great insight in terms of where costing was going. So another great practice by Emser and Mark. Mark, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure to have you and sharing your insights with the audience. I can't thank you enough for that.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being on your show, and thank you for having me today.